Every once in a while, I like to walk through a cemetery. I walk through path after path, stone after stone. Sometimes I get surprised by what I see written on some of those stones. One of those stones in one of those cemeteries was surrounded by grass grown high, weeds invading everywhere. The stone seemed extra gray and cold. It was the grave of a young man. Only 18 summers had been his. Beneath his name, a single line was carved, just 6 words. How many hopes lie buried here? I would imagine that for the disciples of this Jesus who left so much behind to follow him, and those who sought him out for healing and for hope, and the others who watched Jesus die that day, they could have said just those words. They might have chiseled into the stone they rolled across the grave those very words. How many hopes lie buried here? Two of those who followed him and believed in him said almost the same thing as they walked away from that place of torture and execution. You just heard their story. They were talking to each other, and if you were eavesdropping on that conversation, what you would have overheard one say to the other, "We thought he was the one. We thought he was the one." Words that are perhaps amongst the most poignant words in all of our scriptures. We thought he was the one. Make no mistake about it, this was a crisis of faith for those who were his own in the world. This one they thought would be their hero, now mocked in front of all, derided, with a crown of thorns pressed into his skull, a purple robe thrown across his raw shoulders, and hanging from that instrument of torture above his dying body, dripping with sarcasm, INRI, the King of the Jews. If you are the Son of God, come down from that cross, they jeered. Pilate saying about this broken man, "Behold your king." Mocked. They played him for the fool. And seeing all this, as is clear from this conversation, his followers must have felt like fools themselves. Fools for believing in him. Fools for giving up so much to follow him. Fools for trying to live his way, to love his way in this world. We thought he was the one. Are we any different tonight? Haven't we all wondered, if we're honest with ourselves, the very same thing? Sometimes along the way, when things get tough and the mind crowds out the heart. Haven't we all questioned on those walks in the night, scared that we were crazy, and that all of this is a lie? That we gave up too much to follow him, suffered too many deprivations to follow him? Would we not also have walked away from that place of torture and execution, stunned by what we had witnessed, terrorized by what could befall us now, wondering if this will be our fate as well for having loved him? Wondering if someone is going to jump out behind this altar some night and shout, "April Fools!" A fool. A fool is someone most of us don't want to be seen as. We don't want to be made fun of. We work hard not to look foolish to others. We'd rather be seen as sophisticated, rational, acceptable, normal. But the truth is, we're not normal. Neither was he. We don't fit. We are misfits, you and I, and so was he. The fool sees the world from a different perspective. The fool dismantles the accepted wisdom of our time. The fool subverts the acceptable ways of thinking and living and loving. Fools like Jesus, the divine fool. Fools risk mockery by stepping out of socially acceptable roles. They see the world upside down. Or maybe right side up. As you all know, Lent started out this year with Ash Wednesday falling on Valentine's Day. 1946, they tell me, was the last time that happened. A strange coincidence. A strange coincidence did not seem like a coincidence. And we at the CSC spent much of Lent reflecting just about the parallels between Lent and Valentine's Day. The disciplines of Lent and the disciplines of figuring out how to love each other well and be healthy together. The good work, and I mean the work of being healthy together in love, was very much a part of Lent around here this year. And now it's Easter. And once again, there comes this coincidence that has not occurred since 1956, they tell me, of the great feast of Easter and April Fool's Day. In a world that lives increasingly outside religion and even outside of faith, in that world, you can believe that you will be mocked. You will be judged. Are you willing to look foolish for believing in him? For following him? When it's your turn to be mocked and judged, you? I can't answer that for you tonight. Only you can answer that question for yourself, and it's time. It's time to answer that question. For myself, I did something really foolish about 41 years ago when I chose to forego marriage and its pleasures to love you. To love you. You being any community which I was asked to priest. And then I was foolish enough in that moment to make as big of a space as I could in my life for the mystery, for God. Many told me then that I was a fool. And many would say to these couples who stand up here Saturday after Saturday in springtime and in the early fall, giving themselves to each other for a lifetime that can be marriage for 60 and 70 years now, giving themselves to each other for a lifetime, in good times and in bad, and in sickness and in health. Many would say they're fools for doing that. And I look at Karina and Shannon, Elizabeth, Peter, Kimberly, John, Linda, Laura, Lane, RJ, Hope, Margaret, Elizabeth, being received tonight into full communion with our church. You guys really are crazy. You're crazy. Who makes commitments like that anymore? And I look at our students risking ridicule and judgment if they dare identify as believers and followers of Jesus in a culture known to poo-poo religion and faith and deride anybody who dares to believe. In a culture like this, we feel like oddities, you and I. At least in his company, we are good company, at least. I'm just south of 70 now, inching my way to 70 years old. And the question is still never really very far from my lips. Was it all for nothing? Did I waste my life trying to do things his way and not mine? I fell in love with him. I fell in love with what he fell in love with. I bought the vision, hook, line, and sinker. I found myself wanting what he wanted for himself, now for myself. I found myself wanting for others what it seemed to me he wanted for others. That they could just realize that what they had inside of them all the time was all the love they ever needed. And I doubted. Yet even on some of those bad days, I really never knew I could be so happy, that I could experience such a depth of joy, that I could become so capable of giving and receiving love as I find myself to be believing in him and following him, living his way in the world the best I know how, with a lot of mistakes. If this is foolish, so be it. As Christians in this culture of dwindling believers, there's going to be a certain solitariness to our walk. I want you to consider yourself lucky if you have a few companions for a time along the way. Companions who share a trust with you in what is real and what is true, and the way of life that follows, who also choose with you the best they can, as vulnerably as they can, through their days, who walk with you on a lifestyle that is misunderstood and judged and, yes, mocked. There won't be a lot of support. I do hope you find it here at the CSC along the way. But even then, we dare not retreat to our little Catholic bubbles where it's safe so that we don't feel different. Because the truth is, we need to be different so that maybe some few who meet us along the way will be intrigued, maybe even interested about this way of life we've chosen for us because of the way of life we've chosen for us. I want you to trust something. I want you to trust that you are needed as a sign of an alternative reality. I want you to be someone who seems to have spent your life grounded in a reality different and beyond, where you return kindness for ridicule, where your holiness means wholeness. I want you to be folks who are all in, totally committed, despite the possibility of ridicule and persecution, who are learning to let go of how others see us and stand strong. Wanted women and men who are willing to be fools for Christ's sake. In those first days after his execution, some of his own could have carved into that huge rolled stone, "Here lie all of our hopes." But how about this Easter? We carve something else there. How about we carve over that empty tomb, here, right here, all of our hopes are born. How about that for foolish?